All right. So everyone just kept asking for home services. So I'll just keep bringing them. So we got a multi generational plumbing business in Texas. This is just in the suburb of Austin, I believe it is. They're asking 2.4 million, cash flow 764. Perfect example of just the discount you need to give on the cash flow number you get here. So $500,000 in EBITDA, or as close to unlevered free cash flow as possible, without actually diving into the numbers. That is rent, $4,500 a month, not horrible, but in business for what is that, 80 years, almost 90 years. That's a pretty crazy business. Um, Originally established, I have no idea where College Station is. I'm guessing it's somewhere in the Austin area. Business expanded to Austin, third generation family owner, and they have a solid reputation. I mean, 90 years in business, they have to have at least a decent reputation, but three generations in is kind of wild. 10 employees, not crazy tiny, also not crazy big. 10 employees, 1.1 million, or sorry, 2.1 million in revenue, 2.2 almost, 200,000 bucks a head. It's pretty decent. It's not highly maximized for a plumbing business, but pretty decent. Um, Operates out of Austin. That explains the 4,500 bucks a month. Kind of pricey for the facility, given the size of revenue, but not bad. 3% increase every year. I would expect they must own the property, because otherwise, like 3% a year, 4,500 bucks a month, that's a pretty expensive facility. I would expect they own the property. So that's probably what the scenario is. I have to check whether this would be market standard, but I would suspect not. 4,500 bucks a month, pretty decent amount to be spending on an office when you only have 10 employees and you're plumbing. If you're HVAC, you're holding a lot of inventory, different story, but plumbing, and I'm assuming residential, they don't actually specify here, you don't really have that much inventory. A lot of it would be built into the trucks. Um, see. So they're servicing Austin, new residential commercial clients. Okay, so this alludes they probably do some commercial contracts, um, maintenance contracts. They don't do any type of recurring revenue really. Owners willing to remain involved 2 to 3 days a week. Open to consulting. So there's not a whole lot of info in terms of the owner here, but I would suspect 10 employees, if it doesn't include the owner, 2.2 million in revenue. He's probably not heavily absentee, but he's probably not doing much other than driving finances, so accounts payable, accounts receivable. Maybe he might be handling dispatch. When you're getting to multi-generational businesses, the previous owner, right? So the son's dad likely wouldn't want him to be step away from the business style operations. So it's unlikely they have a really established management team, but you never know. On 10 employees, average revenue per head, yeah, they probably don't have an established management team. I would be very surprised if they do. But that said, still, pretty decent little business, assuming the owner is not a part of anything that would require a heavy duty license. The other thing involved with it, when you're getting multi generational, it is often the case that every generation has gone through the plumbing process and probably has a master plumber license. So to be determined there what the requirements will be when you step in, and also whether they're willing to hold the master plumbing license for a period to act as the qualifying agent or qualifying individual to allow you to buy, operate, eventually hire in someone with that license. There'd be cash flow to do it, I would say. So let's take a look at the financials here. Not a bad business, operationally wise, as it seems, but let's take a look. So 2.2 million revenue, 700,000 in cash flow listed. This is probably including some owner salaries and otherwise. Cash flow at EBITDA at 503. This again probably still includes some owner salaries and similar. They're asking top dollar 2.4 million, multiple 4.7. That's probably more because it's generational, but they don't have recurring revenue, so really they're asking for more than they're worth. And so what you'd want to do to de-risk here is give them less cash in hand. But something else to keep in mind, which I break down in some other videos as well, when you're doing the SBA, generally whatever you're paying in principal payments, you're almost paying in interest payments at the current 11% interest rate. So even though it's amortized over 10 years, you're paying, if you were paying, 80% of it cash in hand, and you're paying, a 4 or 5 times type of deal, um, you're basically paying all of your cash flow to pay off that loan because you're basically making equal payments on both interest and principal. So when you really look at it, a 10-year SBA loan is really only the equivalent of a 5-year if you were just splitting up principal over 5 years. And generally, the kind of rule of thumb of sorts in terms of being able to make sure you have a high debt service ratio, which is a good thing, meaning higher debt service ratio, meaning there's more cash than you need to cover debt payments. You generally are okay to pay somewhere in the realm um, of about double. So what I mean by that is if it's a 5-year amortization, you need to be paying 2.5 times the cash flow for the business. If it is a 10-year amortization, you can pay 5 times the cash flow of the business. But that basically means that you're clearing out everything, right? You're clearing out all your cash. So I'll break it down in another video because I know that's probably confusing to hear. But basically, what I'm trying to say here is they're asking top dollar. You can't pay that much in cash, and you can't really pay too much near that in cash. What you can really pay in this current, 10, 11% interest rate market is about 3 times in cash, while still having more than enough cash on the side to pay yourself, make sure the bank's not going to look at it and say, hey, you guys are spreading yourselves way too thin, and really get a deal done. So let's take a look here what that actually means. So 2.4 million is the purchase price you're paying, and they don't mention working capital here. So I'm just assuming, they might leave maybe 2 months worth, and then you got to top up. And so working capital is probably going to be in the realm of maybe 200 grand, 250 that you top up on. If you can get away without, all the better. But you should always assume that you're going to need to get some working capital here. You might get it as a line of credit as well, so you don't need to include it here. But better to be safe than sorry in terms of structuring. So you're going to end up with about $500,000 worth of fees here that you have to roll in. And so just the SBA loan, which, in this case, we're calculating at 80% of the deal, is already more than the purchase price, right? So 2.4 million is the SBA loan. If you're doing 20% seller finance, 480,000 seller finance, you're basically paying out over 4 times cash in hand. And that's a lot, obviously. Monthly debt payments work out to $33,000 a month. You're basically not cash flowing enough for the SBA to look at this as a good deal. Like, yes, you have money at the end of the year, but not enough that the SBA is going to look at this and be comfortable writing a check. So how do you de-risk this? First up, if you can get them to leave working capital, perfect, right? You offset it. I'm just going to assume you're going to be using some type of buy-side advisor or broker or whatever. Again, if you can eliminate that, great. But I like to include it. Obviously, we're a buy-side advisor, so I'll include it for the sake of that. But by all means, we give you more than enough in terms of look at how we do deals to not need to use us, to be honest. So let's look at it that way. Then the other thing is paying 80% up front. It's too much, right? Even if you get rid of all the fees. So let me just zero this out for a second. Your cash flow, your EBITDA at least, is 500,000. Cash flow is 746, and take a 20-25% discount on that. You're just paying too much in cash, right? You're almost paying them $2 million in cash, 4 times, 4 years worth of cash up front. So like I said, 3 years is kind of where you want to be, maybe 3.5, but that's going to stretch you. So 3 years of cash is where you want to be, meaning you can't be paying 80%, but you could probably pay 70 or 65%. So let me add these back here. And if I adjust this and say, hey, we'll pay 70% cash in hand, now we're paying 2 million total with all the fees involved. We're having him seller finance 30%, or maybe he wants the rollover equity. Maybe he doesn't want to give up the generational side of the business just yet. He'll hold on to 30% of equity. And when we look at that, now we're debt servicing 1.5 times. this is more within SBA comfort. Most lenders right now, given current economic scenario, and again, this is always going to be ever changing, interest rates go down or whatever. So at the current time, we are hearing from multiple lenders, once you involve the C word, the construction word, whether it's home services or commercial, doesn't matter. They want conservative approach. They don't want to be hitting their borderlines. They don't want to be looking at owners that aren't locked in for heavy de-risk. They don't want owners walking away with 30 days of transition. They don't want people coming in that have no strong experience where they're willing to learn the business. They don't want people coming in with the idea of a passive investor. These are all just standard things. You got to look at it as if you were writing your own check on the business and you wanted to weigh the risk of, am I going to get paid back? And you're seeing this person go and put, with maybe no interest in, past history in the industries, no experience in the industry, they're going to go and give this guy 4 years worth of cash in hand. Well, that's risky. And, if it was my checkbook, I wouldn't do it. Whereas this gets more on side, you're only as a lender at risk for 20, 25% of the deal. This is more in the realm, right? If they're looking at this as 25% of the deal, you're writing them a $2 million check. Each year after all is said and done, they're going to have over $200,000 there. Now you can start seeing that they have the ability to put cash away to handle your risk. So you need to be looking at deals from that lens, right? You need to look at it from the lens of the bank that's going to give you money, not how am I just going to get this deal done? Because that desperation to do a deal will get you to a bad deal, right? Not every deal is, not every deal price is a good scenario, but in most cases, you can always meet them at their ask in terms of price, but on the terms that make sense for you. Now, that said, if this was, $6 million and they're asking 8 times, no, like just no. That doesn't make any sense. You're going to be paying off this business for like 15, 16 years. It doesn't make any sense. In this case, though, paying, 1 times more than market, I would rather meet them at their ask and get it on terms that make sense for me to be able to pay this off at a reasonable time frame where I'm still cash flowing. I'm still making 150, 200 grand a year. And if I step into operations, maybe 300 grand a year, I would still rather do that than try and push back on price and lose the deal, but also add more risk to myself. Because just because you get the price down doesn't mean you get the same terms, right? You knock down price, well, they're going to expect you're paying more, if not all in cash then. And that's risky, right? If they're not tied to a significant chunk of the business, in this case, $700,000 out of 240,000 or 2.4 million, that's going to keep them around long enough and caring about the business long enough that you get well transitioned. So as a structure of deal, their numbers are not awful. Their ask is not horrible. It's a little bit high, about 1 times multiple higher than I would like to go at. But if you can structure it the right way, so at least 70%, at most 70% cash in hand, and of course get working capital at least 3 months, more like 6 months, you're in a good scenario. Because 6 months working capital will really do you well. If you have to finance your working capital, I mean, the price point itself doesn't make sense, but in that case, you really can't be paying more than maybe like 60% of their ask. But even in that case, you're still paying too much if they're not willing to leave what's necessary to run the business. So that said, that's the deal. I know you guys keep asking for more and more home services. I'll keep bringing them if you keep asking. But if you're in the Facebook group, by all means, drop any questions you have down below. If you're in the YouTube, go ahead and join the Facebook group. It's in our link section somewhere on the YouTube channel. It's basically where we're just dropping a lot more detailed information. Happy to answer questions in there, and you're going to get a lot more insight on everything after finding a deal to reach out to. So everything around how to build perception and how to deal with brokers and how to deal with pre-qualifications and all the stuff that it's actually relatively easy to find, to be blunt, but we just try and make it more simplified for how to get a deal done the right way, not just do a deal, but do a deal that makes sense for you. So otherwise, see you in the next video.